I am absolutely losing my mind right now because that was just so epic. What's up, gamers? Dreamcastguy here, talking today about the PlayStation 5 showcase because I just finished watching it and it was 40 minutes of gameplay, details, and just absolute insanity, including a giant new look at Resident Evil 8 and Final Fantasy XVI being officially revealed. Now, I am the world's biggest Final Fantasy fan, but I want to talk about the games in a second. Let's start off with the console details, because this is the main reason a lot of us tuned in. So Sony has finally officially declared that the PlayStation 5 is, of course, going to have two different editions. The disc edition is going to be $499, and of course, the discless version is now going to be $399. So essentially, $400 and $500. This is the main price point that a lot of us kind of assumed. There were some rumors and stuff that it might be $25 or $50 cheaper than that, but either way, I'm definitely satisfied with it. Of course, the consoles are actually coming out relatively soon as well, with a November 12th release date. It's kind of big shakeup. I mean, this year is about to be very, very jam-packed, but now it's time to get into the games. Now, I thought that this showcase would be a decent look to see how the console was going to shape up for the first few months. I was not expecting it to be literally jam-packed with like 95% raw gameplay. I am still trying to mentally digest this, but let's start off by talking about Resident Evil 8, because I think this was one of the bigger surprises, because while we had seen Resident Evil 8 in teasers, and of course I have reported on the leaks, Resident Evil 8 actually has a much more folklore style of scares to it. Like, instead of trying to just be big ol' sciencey terror, which is typically the realm in which they try and rely with the Resident Evil scares, instead, this time around, it seems like they're going for a more sort of spooky child's tale focus to it, to try and make it seem like that the kind of terror that seeps into your nightmares because it doesn't even fully make sense. And I like that they're doing this. I like that they're kind of pivoting in this direction, and in this trailer, we did get to see new characters, some new weapons it looked like, and of course, some new monsters. It looks like there's going to be some sort of zombie-like people, and also a giant castle. So this is, in a lot of ways, it does look like it's going to be almost a first-person shooter version of Resident Evil 4, and I am totally down for it. Now I have to completely lose my mind and talk about Final Fantasy XVI, because yes, it at last exists. Now, I'm the world's biggest Final Fantasy simp. I mean, all day long, I could talk about this. Not only have I actually played all the games, every single version of them, enjoyed the MMORPG Final Fantasy XIV, but in fact, here, let me be a super nerd, right here, I actually have a bunch of the Final Fantasy books that most people don't even know exist. This is the novelization of the true ending of Final Fantasy XV. Here's the Final Fantasy manga. These are things that most people will never even realize have been distributed. Here's the original Final Fantasy on Famicom from the 80s. Final Fantasy XVI looks like it's trying to step itself more into the classic focus again. They've mentioned specifically that the crystals will be returning, which is like an original focus of the early games, and it looks like it's going to be much more in tune with like airships and sorcery, big giant magic spells, and kingdoms that are constantly rising and falling. And in my opinion, this was definitely the correct focus. Now, we do have to talk about this art style, and I'm probably going to do a follow-up video about this at some point, but I'm a little bit conflicted about the art style itself, because this is just so much in the vein of Final Fantasy XIV, which is almost a hyper-realism version of the classic tropes of Final Fantasy. It doesn't quite have that anime aesthetic that kind of seeps into the other games. But now let's move on to one of the weirder shocks of the show, which is a Harry Potter RPG, although I guess technically we can't call it a Harry Potter RPG because Harry Potter isn't born yet. It takes place in the 1800s, which is still during the peak of power when it comes to Hogwarts. We see the Sorting Hat, we see a lot of magic, and while this did technically leak last year, one of the things that was said about it is that this is one of those games that could only run on the PlayStation 5 because of the solid-state hard drive. It needs to be able to explode environments, have enemies surround you by the dozens. It's one of those games that needs to be able to process things faster than the PlayStation 4 or even the PS4 Pro ever could. I'm not normally a Harry Potter person. I mean, I watched the movies, I read all the books, but I don't consider myself much of a Harry Potter fan, but this game, it does definitely intrigue me, and surprisingly, it's coming in 2021. Now, Call of Duty, this is a game that actually randomly showed. Everybody knows what Call of Duty is. This next one is going to be during the Cold War, and yeah, it's another Call of Duty. I guess the big surprise of this is it does still look decent. I'm still going to definitely try it out, and they decided to drop the random teaser of that if you own a PlayStation 4, there is going to be an exclusive alpha for the game, multiplayer only, this Friday. So even if the game looks boring, well, you might as well give it a shot because, hey, it's freaking free. Now we need to talk about the game that's definitely kind of on my mind, which is Miles Morales. I am a huge Spider-Man fanboy. I really love the web slinger himself, from the comic books to the movies. I mean, I like Spidey. But this new universe they've been making is probably my favorite version of Spider-Man. Spider-Man on PS4 was an absolute masterpiece in my opinion, but Miles Morales looks like it's trying to take things a step further. Now, I loved this trailer, but the big thing that really grabbed me about it was the fact that it looks like Miles Morales is going to have a much bigger toolkit of abilities because, of course, he can turn invisible and shock people, and because of this, they're giving him stronger foes to face. In the trailer, there were people that basically have like robotic superhero equipment practically. They're able to grapple hook people with swords or have their own version of super strength and power armor. So yes, we did see some of that in the Spider-Man PS4, but it looks like Spider-Man PS5 is kind of taking this advanced mecha terminology almost one step further, and I am definitely ready for it. Now, the next game is one that was kind of baffling because I did live stream this reveal and I enjoyed doing that, but one that seemed like chat was the most bored with, but I was certainly engaged with, was Deathloop. We've seen Deathloop before, but now we kind of understand the concepts more. It's basically, there's going to be this island that's full of deadly badasses and super assassins, and we're playing as one that's stuck in a 24-hour loop. His goal is to try and kill the 8-head assassins and dash around the island within that 24-hour period, but this is obviously much harder than you think, not because the guys are extra difficult, but also just because the island is possibly so gigantic. I think that this is an interesting looking game. It is being done by Arcane, which is the people that did the Dishonored games, but as soon as I see this, I realize that this might not be the most mainstream idea. I think this is going to be one of those games that like critics enjoy and the people who play it are going to get super invested, but I'm not sure how much just a random dude coming off the street playing it is going to be super intrigued with the idea of Groundhog Day with guns. Now I do want to talk about 3 games in this reveal. So in this entire 40 minutes, there were only 3 things that were shown that I didn't really care about. Devil May Cry 5 Special Edition, which I love Devil May Cry 5. When I reviewed the game, I gave it a 10 out of 10, but, you know, I'm probably not going to play it again on the PS5 to be honest. Fortnite is coming to the PlayStation 5, whoop-de-freaking-do, and also Five Nights at Freddy's is getting a new game on the PS5. These were the only 3 games that were shown that I just can't really muster up a care about. This is not at all meant to be an insult or a slight, so much as it is just not my style. What is my style, however, is definitely the freaking Demon's Souls remake being done by Bluepoint. Now, when this popped up on screen, I practically yelled just because, alright, so we knew this game existed, of course. We'd seen some tiny trailers and stuff, but this was the first time where they just showed us lots of gameplay. Running around, new death animations, executions, and the new styles of just the way they're lighting the place. Like, I was excited for the Demon's Souls remake, but to be perfectly honest, I kind of thought it would be very minimalistic, just because Demon's Souls has always been a game that kind of had a very reserved art style. It didn't really try and be as crazy, deluxe, and over the top as the later Dark Souls games were, and it looks like they're kind of trying to find an interesting happy medium. It does look more extravagant than the original game did, but it's also not kind of betraying the original vision of it. I'm definitely going to be playing that game. I wish they said a release date for it, but unfortunately they did not. But what they did show that looked really cool was Oddworld. Of course, Oddworld is coming back, and Soulstorm looks fun. It looks funny. I'm going to be checking that out. But I have to talk about the closing teaser. The last thing they decided to do after they talked about console prices, after they decided to show some crazy stuff like the Resident Evil and the Final Fantasy, they decided to take the stage one last time and simply show the logo for the next God of War. Now, there's actually been so much talk about this online, and the big speculation was that it was going to be called God of War Ragnarok, because it makes sense, right? That's the Viking apocalypse. It makes sense that if we're going to be be hunting down that Greek pantheon, of course we'd be going against them, right? Or, sorry, the Norse pantheon. I think that this seems really cool. It is just a logo, but come freaking on. It is God of War, baby. God of War is coming back. It won over me, an absolute God of War hater. I am now fully on board with every future God of War, especially if Cory Balrog is involved. I am still just in utter, I'm just so dazed and confused by so much jam-packed awesomeness. But now, if I had to put a big number on it, somebody's gonna get mad. If I like something too much, somebody gets really offended, but I am straight up giving this a 10 out of 10. And yes, I am being absolutely serious. That fulfilled every single expectation I had. The one thing I hoped they'd show that they didn't was Silent Hill, but everything else completely delivered. I am totally on board for this. I am totally ready for PS5. Give me this bad boy. I'm definitely going to be in line picking mine up midnight of November 11th, and I hope you guys are as well. Thanks so much for watching this video. If you would, please press that subscribe button, like the video if you want, and please help me get to 200,000 subscribers before that PlayStation 5 even hits store shelves. Thanks so much for watching, gamers. Please do me the biggest favor of all and keep dreaming. I'm so lost. That was so crazy. Oh yeah, by the way, bunch of backwards compatibility. PlayStation Plus, there's a new version of like backwards compat of every game. It was so good. I'm so in love with this. I'm totally freaking gonna love my PS5. Hell yeah! Thanks so much for watching that video. If you want to see something else, you can always click this link to see what I put up last, or, subscribe and see what's coming up next. Also, I promise that whatever I do, it'll try not to suck.